Imagine seeing a Caravaggio painting for the first time in, say, 1605. It's probably impossible for us to get into that frame of mind to a time before TV, film, photography, and TikTok, when the only visual arts depicting the human form were painting and sculpture. In the 16th century, the art world in Italy and beyond had seen the high Renaissance with its paintings devoted to ideal beauty, linear perspective, and balanced compositions yield to mannerism and its exaggerated forms, strange juxtapositions, complex, sometimes overly sophisticated paintings that emphasized the artist's talents and fanciful impulses. Then you walk into a church in Rome and see this. It must have been shocking, maybe even too much to handle for some. It's dramatic, crystal clear, so visceral that you feel exposed, vulnerable, involved. It's Caravaggio's The Calling of St. Matthew. You're seeing the moment that Jesus Christ calls Matthew, the tax collector, to be his disciple. As it says in Matthew 9:9, Jesus saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. In the scripture, it's an immediate reaction, but Caravaggio inserts a moment here, a moment of hesitation. Jesus enters what looks like a tavern, obscured by St. Peter and almost entirely in shadow except for his hand, arm, the side of his face, and the slightest glimmer on the halo over his head. He points out Matthew, who instead of getting up and going like the gospel says, points at himself as if to say, "Who? Me?" To the left of him, two of his fellow moneymen don't even realize a divine presence has arrived, consumed by their worldly matters. To Matthew's right, two young men are startled in opposite directions, one leaning toward Jesus and one leaning away, amplifying Matthew's moment of indecision. The scene makes sense right away. But Caravaggio goes much further than just intelligibility. What really shocks about this painting is, of course, the light. The intensely dramatic play of light and shadow called chiaroscuro, or when it's so pronounced like this, tenebrism. The harsh light coming from the upper right of the canvas, like divine illumination, points out Matthew more forcefully than Jesus does. But it's not unrealistic. The opposite, in fact. It's a kind of light we know. We've seen it before. That color, that angle, it triggers our memories of late afternoon sunlight when we're reminded how dramatic reality really is. And what's more, light from that side angle removes the need to add background space to simulate 3 dimensions. The way it wraps around the characters does that job just as well, so that Caravaggio can put a flat wall or a dark space behind his scene, and his figures pop out like they're on a stage or in a dreamlike void, a kind of hyper-reality. See how he achieves the same effect in this painting, Judith beheading Holofernes, or David with the head of Goliath, or the crucifixion of St. Peter, or my personal favorite, the taking of Christ, which was only rediscovered in 1990, by the way. I mean, it's like you're there, crowded in that group. You can hear the metal of the knight's armor, the scream of St. John fleeing. You can feel Judas's hand on Jesus' arm, his kiss as he betrays his friend. You're caught up in it. You know, it's worth noting that this is exactly the kind of painting that the Catholic Church wanted during the Counter-Reformation as it pushed back against Protestantism. One of the Council of Trent's decrees was that art should strive to help Christians understand and reconnect with their faith. With so many illiterate people, painting was a crucial way to transmit the stories of Catholic doctrine. And Caravaggio's work is not only easily understandable, it stirs deep emotion in its immediacy. It puts passion into the passion of Jesus. See, Caravaggio's other great innovation was in his casting of real people in these biblical roles. He painted from life, so his Mary Magdalene, for example, was someone you might see walking the streets of Rome in the year 1600. To some, this realism was vulgar, but to others looking for humanity in these stories, Caravaggio's figures were revelatory, heightening the feelings of identification and involvement that the church wanted from art. The irony, of course, is that Caravaggio himself was a deeply sinful person, by all accounts a complete jerk, given to street brawls and petulant outbursts, which often resulted in jail time. In 1606, he killed a man in a duel and was forced to flee Rome. He bounced around Italy after that, getting in trouble everywhere he went until he finally died, we think, of illness in 1610 at age 38. No doubt his penchant for violent extremes contributed to the haunting renderings of violence in his work, but the romantic stereotype of the mad and frenzied artist who dies before his time is a tired one, and you can't help but wonder what he might have shown us had he just calmed down and lived twice as long. Because what we have got is extraordinary. You can see that he was grappling with his sins and his faith in his work. In The Taking of Christ, for example, he paints himself into the scene, rushing in with the guards, eager to witness the betrayal, the arrest of Jesus. He holds a lantern, signifying the power of the artist to illuminate the stories that mean the most to us, to make them personal, realer than real. Maybe it is possible to know what it was like for people to see a Caravaggio painting for the first time in 1605. His light has traveled 400 years through time undimmed. Against it, we're just as defenseless as they were.